Thank you very much. And thank you for you and your ministry staff being here today. Really appreciate the opportunity to ask you some questions. I'm just going to jump right into it. On the business plan on page 43, the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade leads the government's economic development efforts by supporting Alberta's small and medium businesses, helping Alberta businesses reach new markets, attracting new investment from around the globe, and leveraging science, yay science, and enhancing innovation to their full economic potential. What kinds of small and medium businesses have been helped, and where are they located? Do we have a sense of that? And how does the plan improve or change for this year?
Sure. Okay. So great questions, and again, thanks for acknowledging the great work that the department does. So there's a number of small business supports that we have rolled out. Again, we support them through a variety of programs, whether it's Business Link, Futurepreneur, our Small Business Steward pilot program. In a moment, I will call up Laura Kilcrease, because Alberta Innovates does a significant amount of work with small businesses. She can talk to it, in much more detail than I can. But I can tell you that Alberta Innovates has done a number of things since we consolidated and stood up the one entity. That Laura has spearheaded the ongoing evaluation of the programs and program dollars, as far as where are they going, as far as to which companies, how are we supporting them, in order to track our successes. And so, if you don't mind, Laura, we might as well bring.
I appreciate that.
Good afternoon. We have several different areas that we support small businesses in. First of all, we fund a network of experts called the RIN networks, the Regional Innovation Networks. Within the Regional Innovation Networks, we also have a group of people that fall into two categories. One is called Technology Development Advisors, and they actually work one-on-one mentoring, taking the emerging businesses and moving them further, regardless of what their needs are, whether it's access to market, companies, perhaps access to introduction to capital, working with them to find key talent. We also bring in, on a part-time basis, entrepreneurs in residence, as I call them, or we often call them EDAs here. And entrepreneurs in residence are, in fact, very successful cashed-out entrepreneurs who work together with these particular companies to help them go further. In fact, only yesterday, sometimes I get the information in a different way. I actually read on Twitter yesterday that one of those EDAs has actually just helped one of those small companies called Vereem in the province just close $3.9 million of capital from 3 Silicon Valley investors that have never invested in the province before. So that kind of information is not in my report, but those are some of the mechanisms. Fourth type of mechanism that we have is the incubators, which is another form of helping the companies. We do, in these particular areas, do keep track of what we do, and we do give a scorecard annually. So specifically in the SMEs, in the last recorded scorecard, which was last year, we created 890 new jobs from the SMEs, 85% of which were full-time. In terms of exports, those same SMEs went from 11.8% of the Canadian SME export category. We increased the exports of these particular SMEs, and I hate that word, forgive me. Can? Well, I actually like to think of them as emerging businesses. To call them small and medium, I think, underrates their capability in the province. And I really believe they're emerging businesses that we need to help emerge in a larger sense. But they've actually increased their exports by 46.4%. In terms of diversification of their revenue, 67% of those new jobs are in areas where revenue hadn't come to those businesses or the type of revenue in this province. And in terms of growth, as we plotted them, those companies that traditionally went from self-funding, not all of them, but some of them self-funding, like the example I just have given you, 11% of them have raised additional capital. What does that really mean for us? For every dollar we have been investing in terms of revenue for those companies, they've actually achieved $5.2 in revenue, a 1-to-5 ratio. But more importantly, from my perspective, for a long-term indicator, for every dollar that we have invested, they have actually achieved $28.22 in other investments coming to those companies in the province. And I think as my past life was a venture capitalist, having a 28 times return in such a short period is really pretty amazing. I think I should have been here sooner. Excuse me. And so as a consequence, I think these are the kind of companies also that are key to the growth of our economy. They may be small today, but as they scale, they're going to have a phenomenal impact in the future. I hope that is helpful in that response.
I think it's really interesting, but what I was actually after is what kinds, like what sectors exactly we're seeing development of small and medium businesses through your initiatives as well as through the ministry as a whole, and what part of the province does that cover? Do we have a geospatial relationship with where these businesses are being developed?
There is a listing of that. I don't have exactly all that information here today. I do have a list of 263 companies across the province that we've touched in the last 12 months. Unfortunately, I have to be honest and tell you I've only been in the province 12 months and I haven't been to all those places myself yet. So I can't actually tell you where. But in terms of economically, in terms of where they are by sector, they're strictly across all the sectors we have traditionally measured.
Right.
And I think more importantly, they're in sectors that we are looking for to be new in the province that we may not always directly think about.
Emerging. Great.
And if I can just jump on that as well, member, that Alberta Innovates has staff, as does Economic Development and Trade, throughout the province. So we do have, Laura talked about the technical advisors, but there are also a number of entities, including a facility in Vegreville. I mean, we have facilities throughout the province that really do lend support throughout the province. So it is not, and believe me, this is something that we are focused on, that we need to support businesses everywhere in the province, not just our two largest cities.
Yep.
And Alberta Innovates works diligently on that, as do a lot of our support. So I haven't talked much about, although I'm sure I will, the CARES program, but we have folks throughout the province that provide support to the communities and the entities that have applied for those funds, but also to promote them, to ensure that that people are aware.
Okay, thank you. I'm just really conscious that I don't have a lot of time, and I am looking for specific information. And if it's not available right now, I'm happy to have a follow-up afterwards so that we can find out where that information is. I'm pleased to do that.
Sure, and I think, I mean, what Laura was referencing, I believe Alberta Innovates does post.
I'm just going to move on if that's okay.
Sure.
So I want to refer to page 44, and I'm really happy to hear about the focus and to have an ADM focus specifically on science and technology, I believe. And I'm wondering about your initiatives and the focus of those initiatives in a few different areas. So one of them, on page 44, we've got third paragraph from the bottom, advancing gender equality is a priority for the government, and it mentions gender-based analysis plus, GBA plus, with the establishment of a center of responsibility to assess the gender and diversity implications of engagement processes, policies, programs, and initiatives. Is the center of responsibility something that exists within the Economic Development and Trade Ministry, or is that across all of the ministries? And how do you account for or measure your outcomes against GBA plus as well as UNDRIP?
Yeah, great questions. So it is Government of Alberta wide. So this is a lens that we place on all of our programs as they're being designed. So, I mean, to your question, I'll pass it to John in a moment. What I'm really proud of are the digital media tax credit and the new recapitalization of the investor tax credit that now both have a diversity top-up, which, again, the first time in the country, and so something that I'm very, very proud of, because we want to encourage, obviously, and reward companies that are looking to support people who are either traditionally underrepresented in that sector or from the different communities. But that is, so the GBA, or GBA Plus is an initiative that has been led by the Status of Women, but I can tell you that it's GOA wide. It's not housed just in one.
So something I've asked at a few different ministries is
Sure.
how are we measuring the success of this initiative? How do we see either in the budget or in other reporting that you're getting from your ministry and other ministries, and I know you can only speak to your own right now,
right.
that the efforts are having a positive effect, that they're
Right.
having the effect,
Right.
that you've defined what you want the outcomes to be and that you're meeting those measurements.
Right. Great question. So what I can tell you is that because the AITC and the digital media are just being introduced now, that again, my hope is, and not my hope, we will have some numbers for you next year, because we are tracking the number of companies that we're supporting, how many are accessing, and not just the number of companies, right? Like on the digital media tax credit, that diversity top up is per employee or per worker. So we will have a number of how many people from underrepresented groups are accessing that, and so. I mean, I can get, if you want, I know, Member McPherson, your time is short. I mean, Toby can talk about the program specific if you want to hear from it. But through our ministry, and I can't comment on my colleagues' ministries, but these two initiatives are now being debated in the House, but should they pass, we will be tracking them moving forward. And like I said, in a year from now, we should have some numbers for you. As far as how many are accessing that extra 5% diversity top-up.
And you've referred to Bill 2, which is in the House right now. How is Bill 2 reflected in your funding request in this budget? Is there a line item or a group of items where we would see Bill 2 reflected?
Yeah, that's a really good question, to which I'm going to call on my department officials momentarily as far as where that would be. Do you want to speak to it, Sonia?
Sure.
Should I just turn the microphone? She doesn't really have one.
I'm not far away. I'll hear you.
Thank you. That was related to the Bill 2. So primarily for EDT, it's the digital tax credit program, and you would see that under the statutory vote on the non-voted statutory page. It's about 28 million, and there's a part of it, 12.5 million is related to the digital tax credit program for next year. There's a component of AITC. AITC is split from accounting treatment point of view. Part of it is an expense in EDT, part of that statutory vote line as well. Okay. Part of it is a revenue reduction, so those that apply to the corporations are a revenue reduction and will be. Okay. And CITC is a revenue reduction as well, so that will be reflected in Treasury Board and Finance corporate income tax.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, and since we're talking about AITC, I know in talking with the tech sector in Calgary, that the beginning of the AITC, there was a really slow start, and there were some concerns in the community about funding and about our deals. Actually, like, they had a lot of deals in the hopper already, and they were quite concerned that some stuff might kind of fall off because it took so long. Have you been able to address those concerns? Is the processing time increased, and will we see do you expect to see a full dispensation of the amount allocated in this year's requests?
Great questions. So we worked very closely, and in fact, this is where I do want to give credit as well to Christina Williams, because she works a lot with these companies, the tech sector that are looking to scale and wanted access to it. We worked closely with many folks like the Rainforest Group in Calgary and others. So two things. One, when we first rolled out the tax credits, there was a little bit of a wrinkle which wouldn't allow for companies or individuals who had received funding through the Alberta Enterprise Corporation to be eligible for the investor tax credit. Okay. And initially, where our logic was as government is we didn't want a company to be able to get funding from two different sides. We wanted to avoid the double dipping effect. But what we learned from the community directly, and again, this is a hats off to the business community that gave us feedback that said it's not double dipping. What it's doing is it's a program that is allowing them to be able to scale up even faster, because now they have access to capital from 2 different places that will allow them to grow and hire more people. So we moved quite quickly. Again, a shout out to the department and others who helped work on this. We addressed the issue and resolved it. As far as the getting the money out the door, we did hear the same thing, and the reason why there's a bit of a backlog, the way that I explain it is, if you think about a lineup of people outside of a movie theater waiting for the doors to open, people were jumping in line, and the line grew to a certain length that when we finally opened the doors, it took a little extra time to process those that were already in line. What I can tell you is that we have decreased the time, so we've been able to get funds out the door much quicker than what we have before. I think it's around 30 days. I'm looking to
that's great.
I'm looking to Toby, because of course he's like the expert on everything. Where I believe the processing time, it's about 30 days for it to go out the door, or is it?
It's 7 months.
Well,
If you don't mind, I'll just move on to my next question.
sure.
I'm happy to hear that. I think that's really important. And I think you probably share my opinion of the tech sector in Calgary specifically. The Rainforest, of course, I was lucky enough to participate in their summit, and they have a very positive attitude toward problem solving, which I think we could adopt government-wide. It would be great. I'm wondering if you're working with organizations like Chic Geek in Calgary. I think it ticks a lot of your boxes, where it's a group that is out to train women how to be coders. So it addresses some of the concerns that you've raised in Bill 2. It addresses your GBA Plus perspective. I would really encourage, a connection with that particular group, but I know there's a number of really strong women in STEM organizations in the province, and to see that reflected in your activities, I think would be really positive, because while I know this was alluded to earlier, diversification of the economy is important, but I think we've already got a fairly well diversified economy. What we don't have is a diversity of the revenue for the government, and that is part of my questions to you as well. So on page 46, you have a performance measure of the AITC where you've got your leveraged ratio. Now that has to do with the debt incurred by the government for that particular tax credit, if I'm understanding correctly?
This is the leverage from what we issue for tax credits with the dollars that are being raised. So for 30 million of tax credits approved by the government, it leverages or results in 100 million worth of investments. So what we're doing is we're basically encouraging, incentivizing Albertans to spend their money investing in their own companies.
So what I would like to understand, I know the program's been in operation in BC for a long time, and they're getting tax dollar-wise, they're getting $1.80, I think, on every dollar that they invest. And I'm wondering if you've been able to quantify, in terms of revenue for the government, what you are getting back from this, and what you project to be able to get back from it. Because I imagine the first couple of years, you're going to have a lot of program startup costs that will affect your return. But I wonder if you have a goal in mind, and also if you've considered increasing the percentage of the tax credit to be more competitive than our neighbors to the west who have better weather than us.
So I mean, what we did in this second iteration of the tax credit. So, sorry, to back up, those numbers as far as how much does it leverage, that we are tracking that. And so because the tax credit is newer, I mean, just this year we were issuing credits, or not us, but CRA for the first time, that we will have those numbers as far as, like you said, in BC, a dollar is leverages at $1.80.
Do you have a goal?
Well, for us, it's obviously trying to maximize how much we can leverage, but the percentage amount. So we did a cross-jurisdictional scan on what other provinces do, and then that's how we landed on the 30%, looking at what is the right number to de-risk an investment, but at the same time, we don't want the government incurring all of that risk.
To be that exposed.
And so, exactly. But what we have done, and what I'm excited is to see the numbers next year, especially with that diversity top-up, that there is that extra 5% for companies. And so, the long and the short is that we're obviously tracking the numbers. The program still is relatively new, but I'm excited for, again, the success that we've seen in other jurisdictions
it's
and
really
anticipate the same.
I hesitate to interrupt. The allotted time for the third party has now concluded.